We're at the end of a week that's seen massive military drills across the Indo-Pacific region, with many the largest iterations in their history. With Australia's Talisman Sabre, here you can see HIMARS long-range rockets being fired for the first time, the Philippines' Cope Thunder aerial drills, which ended today, Taiwan's extended Han Kuang exercise, which also concluded today, and the US Air Force's Resolute Force Pacific, or RFORPAC. What it all means is upward of 69,000 troops and 20 nations are gathered across our Indo-Pacific region and will be for weeks to come. But what are they rehearsing? Why are this year's drills different? And could they, in fact, be a preview of what might be to come? These are questions that relate to the request made by top US defense official Elbridge Colby of his Australian and Japanese counterparts, according to the Financial Times, to ask what role they would take in a US-China war over Taiwan. Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Yin Khvat. Talks is back, though on a minimal schedule and with a skeleton crew for the next few weeks. Joining us today are Tony Hu, former US Department of Defense Senior Director for China, Taiwan and Mongolia, and Alexander Huang, Council on Strategic and Wargaming Studies Chair, Kuomintang, Director of International Affairs. Tony, Alex, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, before we get into the exercises, the Financial Times reported on July 13th that US Undersecretary of Defense for Policy Elbridge Colby has been asking US allies, Japan and Australia, over the past few months how they would act in any war over Taiwan. The FT reported that the two allies were, quote, frustrated since the US itself has a policy of ambiguity on whether it would come to Taiwan's defense. Colby didn't deny the report and wrote this on X. Trump's agenda of restoring deterrence and achieving peace through strength is, quote, by urging allies to step up their defense spending and other efforts related to our collective defense. Tony, let me come to you first. So in your view, what do you make of this? Was it a reasonable request by Elbridge Colby, given the backdrop of all of these military drills? Presumably they're training for war against China.
The request in and by itself is reasonable. However, this type of national security discussion usually are handled in a classified environment. And in those type of environment, behind closed door.
But how do we know it wasn't in a closed door, secure environment?
Most likely it was.
Yeah, it was a leak.
I'm almost certain it was. Yeah, it was a leak. It's very unfortunate. So in a public environment, our allies, Japan, Australia, have no choice but to remain non-committal. Because that's the public, the policy that's in the public.
Was it interesting to you that these were, this request was a new commitment that was being asked? Do you think, if previously this was never asked in private?
I have no doubt, because we want to make sure there are certain things that can be counted on. For example, I think what we should look at is action speaks louder than words. Okay, you look at the type of trainings and exercise Japan and United States have done together in Australia. Okay, I will guess that we should fully expect Australia and Japan are written into our joint war plan for the defense of this region. You can see from activities, look at the magnitude and the frequency of exercises and trainings together. So these exercise and training are based on what? Are based on certain joint war fighting capabilities. But
also on the expectation that they would be part of it, because what is all this planning for if it is not to engage those parts?
Certainly.
Okay, and Alex, before we get to the next section, so should we read anything into Colby's request? You know, some reports say that this means that, you know, that he's injected, or the US has injected clarity into something that was always ambiguous.
Yeah, traditional view will say that the United States itself is holding a ambiguous, you know, fashion of commitment, but forcing the allies to make it very clear. But I look at it from another angle. I think probably Japan and Australia saw this leakage or this piece in public domain. It's a good thing because they want to show their own domestic audience that they are under pressure, so they can do what, you know, probably at budget and legitimize, you know, their actions that following, this statement.
Okay, we'll come to that in a little moment. Let's take a look now at how Australia's Defence Ministry Industry Minister Pat Conroy responded when asked about the issue on Australian Broadcasting Corporation's Insiders program. Watch this.
Are we giving a clear answer behind closed doors to these repeated questions?
Well, first, I don't disclose confidential discussions, but I make a couple of broad points. One, we don't engage in hypotheticals. We don't discuss hypotheticals. But secondly, the decision to commit Australian troops to a conflict will be made by the government of the day.
So, Alex, we talked about, obviously, it was a leak to the FT, but should close allies be able to share this kind of sensitive information confidentially? So, for example, is it reasonable for Colby to be asking if this was to happen this year, or if this was to happen next year? What would your response be?
I agree with Tony's assessment. I think, asking these kind of questions is legit, okay, from the standpoint of the United States. So when I look at the reporter who contributed to this piece, Dimitri is a renowned, correspondent. He has his reputation. So I do not believe it's a fake or make-up story. There must carry some truth in it. I think the leakage itself is also an art. It's operational art, that how you chart your course to get to your goal.
Tony, Japan, as well as Australia, as we heard there, called the Taiwan crisis as a hypothetical. But is this helpful, or is this somewhat shifting, given Xi Jinping and the CCP's insistence, increasing insistence that their intention is to take Taiwan by force, and also, as you have talked to us about, alongside a Chinese nuclear buildup, alongside the amphibious lift capacity being boosted, significantly upgraded, two factors before always seen as prohibitive to an invasion?
Under the current political environment, they can't say anything different. They have to say, hey, I won't comment, it's hypothetical. But once again, as I said earlier, look at their actions. I think right now, Japan has pretty much understood its own national security is tied with Taiwan's security, and in fact, the entire First Island chain.
Sort of honing in on Australia, Colby is also reviewing the AUKUS program. This is for the US to sell nuclear submarines to Australia. And Colby is basically saying that the US needs these more than Australia in a Taiwan crisis. So how do you view Australia's willingness or unwillingness behind closed doors to communicate what it would do?
Well, I think I would assume that in closed door conversation, people are trying to be very frank and candid on this issue. But in my own private conversation with Australian, interlocutors, they assure me that the program will continue and with full support of the United States and UK.
Do you believe that Colby is testing the Australians on this issue?
Yeah. I mean, we both know Bridge Colby personally, and I talk to him all the time. So I think he is a very skillful person, and he may, that's his style. He will, test and see how the counterpart would react to his proposal.
Is there a form of pressure there? If we're going to be selling you these arms, then we do want you to stand with us. I mean, this is actually, Tony, the agreement, isn't it? In a sense, when allies buy these weapon systems, very expensive, very advanced systems from the US.
Absolutely. I think the original concept of AUKUS submarine is that we want to provide Australia a nuclear power submarine capability because the current submarine, the Collins class, does not have the endurance to support in a Taiwan or South China Sea scenario. So that was the objective, to provide that nuclear power submarine, and also to provide Australia 3 Virginia class, and the remaining is AUKUS submarine that Australia and United Kingdom working together. So United States saw that as part of the overall strategy for the entire Pacific. And
So if those systems were not going to be used in essentially the greatest threat.
It is a problem because just a few months ago, the Chinese fleet circumnavigated Australia and even conducted live fire exercise right next to Australia. So these are the type of capability Australia needs to have as part of the coalition that we expect them to help us with. So I suspect right now it is, I think Undersecretary Colby is trying to pressure Australia a little bit more on their contribution to the overall defense capability in the Asia-Pacific region.
Which is aimed at China?
Which is aimed at China. There's only one adversary at this point,
right,
which is China.
So it's aimed at China and a Chinese invasion of Taiwan.
Right, and also Chinese expansion of their influence into South Pacific.
As well. Okay. Just briefly, Alex, on Japan. So recently in their Defense White Paper 2025, again, they have warned that China is Japan's greatest strategic challenge. But recently it's complained twice to China about Chinese planes buzzing very close, 30 meters, 40 meters between the Chinese and Japanese aircraft over the East China Sea. There was also an incident last month. So in your assessment, just how dangerous is that situation?
Close encounter is dangerous.
Yeah, I should say that they stayed for 10 minutes and 15 minutes in the most recent instance.
Right. And all the operators, I mean warfighters or pilots, they understand the risk. But however, the Japanese side, they have their responsibility to conduct reconnaissance flight. And the carrier-based, fighter jets needs to maintain a certain range of, defense for their capital ship. So the action for military experts, I think the actions are reasonable, have been doing before, but very close in contact has been very dangerous.
And what do you make of the timing of doing this right now when all these military exercises in Japan is obviously taking part? What's the message from China?
I think if we are not talking about the two carrier groups, last month or a few weeks back, but talking about recent, exercises, it fits in, Tony's narrative about deeds rather than words. We can look at the newspaper reports, but if we look at the magnitude of these exercises involving the Philippines, involving the Japanese and the Australians, then you put it together at the same time frame with Taiwan's Han Kuang exercise, then you will get a different kind of picture.
Okay, let's go to that picture now. So let's turn now to this season of military exercises. All are significant in their own way. Let's start first with the Philippines, Cope Thunder in northern Luzon, closest to Taiwan, which saw the US's most advanced weapon system, the F-35, in the Philippines for the first time. It ended today. You're watching the promo video here. There's also the 20th anniversary of exercise Talisman Sabre in Australia, which extends for the first time to Papua New Guinea, involving a record 35,000 plus troops from 19 countries, and has kicked off live fire drills of HIMARS, that's the US's high mobility artillery rocket systems, for the first time again. The doubly extended Han Kuang in Taiwan, which ended today, involved a record 22,000 reservists and tackles grey zone warfare and civilian defense, along with all-out war. And finally, the US's Resolute Force Pacific, REFORPAC, which is about forward deployment and dispersal of US forces across the Pacific. And that is also the largest in decades. So, Tony, let me ask you, just how critical are all these war games? Alex spoke about we shouldn't look at them individually. We look at them as perhaps a lattice work.
Sure. Let's talk about REFORPAC, Return of Forces into the Pacific, or Resolute Forces Pacific. It's similar to our old days. We'll have something called Reforger, Return of Forces Germany, where we thought the Warsaw Pact is going to come through the Fulda Gap into Germany, and we forward deploy. And when I was young, I participated in that. So what it is a fourth generation deployment and dispersal exercise. So the forces in the theater will do the dispersal, and the forces in the United States, for the follow-on forces to support the war effort, will generate and mobilize, deployed into the second island chain. The first island chain forces were dispersed and from Alaska. So these are a force employment exercise, not actually a warfighting exercise, because in a scenario where we have to counter China, we have to make sure we get enough forces to the region.
So in terms of the first island, second island chain, it's just for our viewers. Essentially, this is a line. First island chain is closest around China.
Right.
Second island chain is further out.
It's like Hawaii, Guam, and Saipan, and Tinian. So the U.S. forces will move forward, and all those units that has a Pacific tasking that supports the war effort in the Pacific will mobilize and do that to demonstrate we can do it, because in and by itself, the exercise is also deterrence to show how fast we can get out here. And so that's important. Then we look at Talisman Sabre, 19 countries, 35,000 people. This is where coalition building takes place. This is where we exercise joint command and control. This is where we work on tactics, techniques, procedures that we share the same way when we fight. So Australia is helping the United States in that effort, the coalition building effort. And of course, Cope Thunder is something we have done. And actually, the news report about being the first time F-35 get deployed, it's not true. I was in Clark last year, around this time actually. There was 6 F-35Bs right there with the U.S. Marines.
Sorry, the first time in drills.
Right, F-35s. So we've been there, and I don't know why it's reported as first time. We've been there several times. And I got on the flight line and talked to the Marines as they were trying to load the 2,000-pound JDAMs. But so U.S. presence in this region is continuous, and exercise with friends are continuous. So combined with Taiwan's own Han Kuang, I think the pieces all fit together. And there's one single enemy, China.
Right. Alex, why do you think so many of these exercises are rejuvenated, extended this particular year? What is it?
I would not say that this year is so critical, but we are approaching to 2027, as many have assessed.
And 2027
is only 2 years away, and that 2027 has been characterized as a Davidson window before China reached the capability to take Taiwan by force at their will. So I even consider these kind of exercises that taking place in the same place. It's a little bit too late, but we should start it earlier if we are looking at 2027. I want to add, one piece to Tony's assessment or view, is that it's also a training for joint logistics.
Yes, absolutely. That is the key.
Yeah,
Very
the key
good point.
So allied forces can share their munitions and in different places. That any particular time and location, the allied forces can get logistic support.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought it up, because this exercise, whether it's Resolute Forces Pacific or others, we have many what we call acquisition and cross-servicing agreement, where if our C-130 lands in a Philippine base and our tire get busted, the Filipino has C-130, they can put their tires on, we settle the bill separately, and that type of activity, logistic support, is so important in a coalition warfare scenario, because we don't want to have to bring everything to a new location. If the host nation can support it, in Japan, in the Philippines, in Australia, and they go to a U.S. base where we can support them, then it's more effective for all of us. So that's a great point. The exercise in and by itself, not only to make sure we can command and control together, but logistically, we can work together.
Right. Perhaps the stuff that doesn't make the front page of the paper, but still incredibly critical. Right. Let's focus in a little on Taiwan's 41st Han Kuang, which this year ran for 10 days, double that of previous years, and tackles an invasion by China in a comprehensive way, starting with grey zone warfare, followed by invasion and all-out war in cities around the country, including the capital of Taipei, as well as whole-of-society defense across schools, businesses and supermarkets. Taiwan showcased the deployment of the US-supplied HIMARS, high-mobility artillery rocket systems, as well as its indigenously made Land Sword 2 surface-to-air missile system. Alex, let me come to you first. China is the threat, as we've established, that's uniting these allies. Now, China's defense ministry said that Taiwan's Han Kuang exercise is nothing but a bluff. On CCTV, ministry spokesperson went on to say, no matter what weapons are used, Taiwan can't resist the People's Liberation Army's sharp sword against independence. What do you say about the allegation of bluff?
I don't know whether the Chinese bluff in their statement. The stronger their reaction to our joint military exercises, especially this year, an extended drill involving civilians and civil defense. I think the stronger they react, the more clear the signal they got.
The more worried that they are.
Yes, because Taiwan is doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So they react to that.
Okay, Tony. So we can then probably read that this is a China public response. What is the message you think that Beijing is really receiving privately? As you said, the U.S. essentially mobilizing. It sounds like it's preparing or practicing to mobilize, and all of the logistics, which is critical to actual war. You know, what's Beijing thinking?
Hopefully Beijing understands that if they start something, they will not be fighting just Taiwan. They will be faced with a coalition of forces, because the peace and stability of the Western Pacific is of national interest of many countries. And they will come over to ensure that remains so. So if China starts something, I think obviously Taiwan will suffer, but they will also suffer, especially the coastal area in front of Taiwan, Zhejiang, Fujian, Guangdong area. And these are their economic centers. This is the money-making area. So if they lose the war, which they will, they not only will lose the war in by itself, but economically, they will suffer so much that they might be pushed back into a third world country.
So do you think that this could be a successful deterrence, or is annual or biennial, which is what Talisman Sabre is that too infrequent? Maybe I'll ask Alex.
Well, I think, you know, right now we see a upward or increase of the frequency and investment on drills and exercises, and involving more and more countries in these type of exercises. I think it's not only a political signaling, but also a deterrent. And China needs to understand it was Beijing that sent 2 carrier groups to the eastern part of the first island chain first. So it's not only the United States targeting China, it's China is practicing their anti-access and area denial capability, you know, way beyond the first island chain.
Right.
So this is already the strategic map that we are looking at.
Okay. Very briefly before we end, Tony, I want to ask you about the possible leak, because the timing, is that coincidental, this sort of just before this week of the massive exercises? Could it be, for example, the US wanting to increase that pressure on allies?
You know, I'm hesitant to guess, because there are pros and cons on both sides, whether it's the US or if it's the allies, or is it China deliberately make sure this happens so that they can sort of take advantage of it and break the seam, say, hey, the United States trying to make you commit when they themselves remain ambiguous.
So to drive wedges between...
Right.
I mean, I don't know whether China was involved in the leak, but that would be a message to China.
Certainly.
Right.
Certainly. This is an opportunity for China.
How did you read it, Alex? Could it be the US or could it be the Australian side that leaked it?
I have no idea, but it was leaked, and I do not.
What would be the motives behind?
I think the motives is political signaling, sending the message to Beijing, and it's
From
only
the
the military part. I think it's part of the overall message because China and the United States is involving in trade talks and tariff negotiation, and also people are planning for possible leadership summit. I mean, this is a full package in my assessment.
Okay. Tony, very final question. At the end of the day, could these exercises, these drills, if China were to take Taiwan, could these be a preview? Could these foreshadow the future?
Actually, yes. I think because of the threat is increasing, that's why you see a larger increase in the number of exercises and the participants and the magnitude of each exercise itself. It's in responding to a threat. If the threat wasn't increasing, the exercise wouldn't be so large.
Right. Could we see these players potentially in any war over Taiwan?
I believe so, because they all participate because their national interest is involved in the peace and stability of the region.
As Colby said, our collective defense. We need to work towards our collective defense. We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much, Tony and Alex, for joining Taiwan Talks. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.